Oh, baby, it's Tuesday night. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm sure there's going to be a difference of opinion or two between Sunil and I. That's the way it normally works. But we've got Bleacher Report giving Ricky Pearsall comps for the year. We'll see how that turns out or what we think about it. Should the 49ers reshuffle the offensive line to get the most out of it? And what should we expect from Bosa and his new running mate? We're going to talk about those things plus more, and we're going to do it next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Tuesday night, which means I got my guy, So Real, Sunil, in the building. What's up, Sunil?
Man, just another day, another dollar. Excited to be on the show with you. I feel like I think we did ours last week, but it feels too long, my friend. It feels too long.
Oh, it definitely feels like it's been too long. You know, we were going to talk about, we'll still talk about this Brandon Ayuk situation from the aspect of the Instagram post. I'll let you break that down. But there's also some newer news, not breaking, I guess. It was a few hours ago, but another receiver just got paid big time money for the Texans, which means the price keeps going up for one Brandon Ayuk. So, first of all, this cryptic post on Instagram, what the hell did it say? And what are people making of this? I don't listen, man. I try to keep up. I feel like I'm pretty cool for a 40-year-old, but dude, I don't even know anymore. And I know you're like my age, so I don't know if you can maybe decipher. We got some young people in the chat, but dude, I don't even know what's going on anymore. But people are like, oh, this means something. It's super important.
Yeah, I mean, I got to shout out to Coach Yak because his Twitter or X account is what keeps me up to date with a lot of these Instagram.
All right.
But yeah, so it seems as if most of the posts that Ayuk does put up on Instagram are football related. Some are family related, but like he has been putting up a lot of stuff that easily could be, correlated to what's going on with his negotiations and so on and so forth. So his latest post is him in his car, and the caption says, "I'm way too hungry to be splitting my food up like that." So it could be anywhere from a random line from a rap song that he just heard that he thought was really cool to
the Debo route. No, it's just music, bro. It's just music. And then I'm requesting a trade next week. All right.
Right. Or it could be, obviously, what most of us think it is, he doesn't want to, he's not looking to take any hometown discounts. So we know that the 49ers are extremely interested. We also know, like you mentioned, price tag keeps going up. From the latest reports, he's looking for a 4-year, $30 million, annual salary, which would be 4 years, 120. That's a lot of money for a receiver. But ultimately, we all think it comes down to the guarantees. But yeah, I mean, gotta give props to Houston. Nico, I don't think is even up for. I mean, I think was he drafted the same year as Ayuk? I don't think so.
No.
But he wasn't a first round pick.
3 years in, so yeah, he'd be entering, I believe, his final year of his deal.
Yeah.
Year 4, if you're not a first round pick.
And I would say this is the first one. This is the contract where, Ayuk clearly, I would say, is a better receiver than Nico based off of, second team All Pro, consistently, to back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons now. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's safe to say that Brandon Ayuk wants his money, and whether or not the 49ers are going to budge off of that is, I think at this point, Jesse, we say this every single time, but it feels different. So to be determined whether or not they finally get it done with him.
Yeah, I don't, dude. I had a pretty good pulse and feeling that he wasn't going to get traded. But I was talking about this with Coach last night, and let me run this by you. I think that not only are the 49ers surprised that this price is presumably at around 30 million annually, but I think even Brandon Ayuk's a little bit surprised that it's getting this high. Because what I envisioned probably happened was, Ayuk was maybe around 27, 28, something like that. And then the day before the draft, the St. Brown deal drops. And it's like, oh, word. So we're getting 30 out here. Okay. So the 49ers go through their draft process. They don't have the intention on trading Ayuk. I'm sure they listen to calls, but ultimately nothing really moves them. Then they get through the draft process and they go to the negotiation table, and Ayuk's like, yeah, yesterday's price is not today's price.
Right.
Word is I can get 30. And they're like, dude, if we would have known that, we might have traded you. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like there's a possibility that some of that's going on because that deal literally dropped the day before the draft, which is crazy.
Which, ultimately that's on the 49ers, right? They have to know what's out there. And ultimately,
Yeah.
I think initially it was all right when you had like one or two players, like earlier when they were signing the, Kittles, they're signing the Fred Warners, all of this. You could wait until training camp. But ultimately, when you already have these salaries on the books, you have certain players that are going to fit in that top tier money category. I still don't get why they don't get these deals done early because the price is only going to go up, right? And there's still two receivers out there, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, that we know are going to be even higher. So to me, it's kind of a situation where ultimately I think that if a deal doesn't get done here soon, Jesse, a deal might not get done because I think once CeeDee Lamb's deal and once Jefferson's deal gets done, if they're not willing to pay 30 million, they're definitely not going to pay what those two are gonna end up getting. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, well, let's just get into it. Let's come with some bold predictions. Do you think week 1 comes around and Brandon Ayuk has a deal in hand? Like he's
Um,
signed a deal, he's here long term, it's locked up come week 1.
no.
So you think he plays on the 5th-year option, basically?
Yeah.
Okay. So then follow-up question. Is he playing week 1?
I think he has to, right? Because ultimately they lose money if they don't. Because I think what's going to happen that's different from maybe other deals that the 49ers have come, like I think if I think they're going to ultimately say, look, we're not going to be able to get a deal done, and probably a handshake deal that we're not going to franchise you. So ultimately, then it gives Brandon Ayuk the say, okay, I'll just play this last year out. I'll be able to have a true free agency, next year. And I think maybe something like that can happen. But I think there comes a point where the 49ers are just not going to pay the money. And it's all, like you said, it's only getting, if guys like St. Brown, who obviously is a stud, but I don't know. I didn't get into the details of the Nico Collins deal. Do you remember what the APY is?
24.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously that I think that's where the 49ers wanted it to be, right? So ultimately it's not
Probably.
going to be that, right? So I think it seems like maybe the 49ers are capped at like 27, 28 maybe max. And if he
Yeah.
wants 30, he's going to have to take less or they just don't get a deal done.
Yeah. I mean, I personally think a deal is done, but I also don't think it's 30.
Yeah.
So that means that
So
he's in
you believe he
acquiesce somewhere. I believe what?
you believe he comes down on his.
Yeah. I mean, either that or the ask was never 30. I mean, reports are reports. It's coming from a credible source. I'm not saying that this person is lying or putting out false information, but maybe there's a possibility that that's not the ask and they're still far apart, or maybe he's willing to come down. Man, if he doesn't have a deal, he doesn't have to play until like week 6. He just has to make sure that he can accrue a full year. And that's where it gets interesting, which is if he doesn't play, how do the 49ers do? And every game they win, he loses leverage, but every game they lose, he gains leverage, right?
Right.
So it's this, I don't know that we've ever seen. I mean, have we in the Shanahan era seen something like this? The longest we've seen it drag out was Bosa, and he got his deal before week 1. The only other person that they couldn't reach a deal with, or two people really, which was a rework recently of Eric Armstead, which they just cut him. And then the other one was Buckner, where they felt like, hey, we can't afford it. So they traded them well before the draft. But Ayuk, they probably felt like, hey, we can find common ground. We're going to be good. But as soon as that Amon-Ra St. Brown deal dropped, that was it. All bets were off. So
Right.
I don't know, man. This one
a
might go somewhere that the others have not.
I think there's a resolution that happens before the season starts.
Mm.
I don't necessarily mean that that's a deal though. Like
Yeah.
I think they do something to guarantee that he plays week 1, but it doesn't necessarily mean they get an extension done with him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And yeah, Soko, I mean, this is kind of where my mind's at, right? Maybe he gets an APY that's a little bit smaller or less than 30, but the guarantees more, which is really what's important. You want more guaranteed money. But then there's also that ego thing that really does come in. It's like just the number of the deal when it gets posted, that's a thing. And if you don't think it was a thing, it certainly was for Trent Williams. He wanted that number to be the highest out of all left tackles. That was a hang up in his deal. So I don't know where Ayuk's at from a ego standpoint, if he's on that Trent Williams level, but if he wants that number to look higher, then 30 million is what it's going to have to be. So I don't know, man. This one's going to get interesting for sure. Brother Bob says, Sunil, we still good? Kyle Levy is the problem.
I mean, I love that he keeps spending to say the same comment over and over and over again. But
Dave says BA deserves his. Debo doesn't. Trade Kyle. Jeez, man. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, let's talk about a different position group altogether, or a different area of this team, which is the offensive line. Now, it seems as if, correct me if I'm wrong, and it depends on how you want to look at the offensive line, but basically what started the Super Bowl was, I mean, they were still doing the rotation with the Burford and Feliciano at right guard, but really it seemed like Feliciano was the right guard until he got hurt in that game. So the starting lineup was Feliciano, right guard. You had McKivitz, right tackle, Brendel, center, Banks, and then Trent Williams.
mm-hmm.
That seems to be the trend that they're headed to going into camp, at least. However, they have made some moves, brought in some young talent. Do you believe they should shift around this offensive line and come with a different unit? And if that is the case, what are you proposing?
Yeah, and I think it's just an interesting thought process to go through, just because we know Brendel is going to miss some time due to his knee issues, right? So it's like, okay, well, why not try out some new lineups there and see, if there's anything they like. Now, I'll preface this by saying I don't think any of this happens, because I think continuity is what Kyle Shanahan really values. And obviously, I think they'll play everybody at the same positions. But I do think that one thing the 49ers do well is bring people in that can be versatile. And he has some guys there that have played at a high level at different positions, right? So what I would propose, what I think would be interesting to see out there, is a lineup where it's Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Feliciano at center, Pooney at right guard, and then Burford at right tackle.
Oh.
And see because the reason why I'm saying that instead of Colton, even though, like I said, I don't expect this to happen. If you can get some continuity with these young guys, meaning 3 of those guys are Aaron Banks, Pooney, and Burford, I think long term that puts you in a really good position where most of these guys are going to be either cheap, or you could re-sign them for potentially, lower than market rate, just because they haven't necessarily showed out quite yet. And that could be then you can fill in the other pieces of the aging guys kind of thing, and through the draft or through free agency, whatever way they seem fit. So I think that would be interesting. I would like to see how it works. Obviously, that's moving Burford out of his position, which might not make sense, but I know guys like Marco, who I respect his opinion, felt like he might be a better right tackle than he is a right guard. And I really like Feliciano, and I think instead of him being in rotation, why not just give him a much more important role as a center on that line, and he'd just be there every single week.
Yeah, that's interesting. Burford played tackle in college, so presumably he's probably more comfortable there, and I think his body type is more built for a tackle spot. I don't know if I would go that far. I don't know what we're going to see from Burford if he's kind of maxed out. We have to remember that, like, the expectations for a guy like Burford or McKivitz or Brindell, we have all these high hopes, but they're low picks or undrafted guys that we continuously put our stock into, and then we expect these great things from them. It's like, well, maybe they're just maxed out. Maybe they are what they are. So I don't know about the right tackle thing, but I'm definitely with you when it comes to Feliciano at center. I think that would be an upgrade. He said he's a better center than he is a guard. That came out of his mouth last year before he was fully ingratiated with the 49ers. So I think that would make sense to put him there. I think he would be an upgrade over Brendel. And then I think Pooney, man, I mean, between him and Burford, or however they want to swing it, I would hope either Burford's good enough at this point, or Pooney, being a guy who played a lot of college football and was drafted in the 3rd round, is able to start right away. I mean, I don't think that is too much to ask for a 3rd round pick that did play as much football as him. So, and then from there, you can figure it out. Like, okay, well, if Burford's not the starting right guard, maybe he can compete at right tackle. I'm fine with it. But I do think that it starts with Feliciano at center, and whatever they do from the right side over, I'm good with as well. Just let the best man win.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think, you have a kind of blessing in disguise, I guess, silver lining, that it kind of opens it up because of what's going on with Brendel. So I think they should, but ultimately, if you ask me who I think is going to be week 1 starters, it's going to be all the same guys.
Yeah, you're probably right about that, but one can wish. One can wish. Drewish guy, who I call Dariush guy, says I would sit all the big games out. I'm assuming he's saying if he was BA. So week 1, you're sitting, and then you're back, and then you're sitting again. That I'll say this. I don't know if BA sits, but one thing that could happen is if he gets a minor tweak, instead of playing through that minor tweak, he's like, I got to get paid this offseason. I don't have anything guaranteed past this year. So guess what? I'm not playing unless I'm 100%. And I think that's where things can kind of get sketchy with the 49ers and trying to win and meet those Super Bowl aspirations, where you had everybody in the foxhole ready to go last year. Now you'll have certain players possibly making business decisions that they wouldn't normally make if they were fully locked down or had guarantees. So I think that's something to look out for from BA if he doesn't get his deal.
I mean, that's a lot. That's BA's risking a lot there too, because he's banking on he has enough film where another team is going to be willing to pay him off of not his last year of production, right? So that's I don't know how I don't know if there's been a scenario where that's worked out for a player. So
yeah, I think outright sitting out, just, hey, I'm not going to play unless I get a new deal, versus, hey, I tweaked a hamstring, I'm out, I'm going to miss 3 weeks, is different. You know what I mean? It's like, I had a tweak.
yeah, but I'm
and then
saying,
I
like, have
produced
we
in the
seen
games that I was there.
Have we seen that though? Have we seen a player go out and get, because he's looking for top 10 money. So I don't think guys like us, I believe he's a top 10 receiver, but I know if I say that, it's not everybody agrees with me.
It's not
So
universal. Yeah.
yeah, so I would assume that that if he plays, hey, I have an injury or a lingering injury or something like that, that might affect him in negotiations. So I think that it's more. I think that if the 49ers decide we're not going to franchise you, like if they give him that, hey, we won't franchise you, um, I think BA goes out and tries to put up the best numbers that he can put up, because ultimately that's what's going to get him the money that he wants.
Yeah, I mean, one can hope. That's what makes BA so likable from the fan base is he does work his butt off and he does try his hardest every play, not just every game, every play. But then there's that flip side too, right? Like not every team requires you to be this sweet blocker either. Like, does he start making? I don't know. I just feel like you're leaving it open for possible business decisions to be made that
Right.
aren't necessarily there or haven't been necessarily there. But then the flip side of that is, to your point, he's not a consensus top 10 wide receiver. Some people have him there, some people don't. So how does that play into things? It gets
And
interesting.
I think, not seeing a lot of receivers leave the Kyle Shanahan system and go out there and produce at the high at a clip as well can
Mm-hmm.
go against them as well, right? So I don't think Ayuk is a what's it called? Uh, is his numbers are because of the system. I actually think he would have bigger numbers if he was targeted more, or like the ball didn't spread as much around as it does in this offense. But I I think it's not as cut and dry for Ayuk on the free market as like maybe some people think it is.
Yeah, that's fair. Brother Bob says, okay, Sunil, you win. I like Kyle Levy. Are we good now?
We good, brother Bob. You the broken record that keeps bringing up the same topic over and over and over again. We like talking about new stuff.
Dave says, okay, think of the other side of BA. Does he sit out if they don't pay him? We just kind of discussed this a little bit, but he says it might be a blessing in disguise if he hits free agency with the new market. Maybe that becomes 40 mil a year, 4 years, 100 million guarantee. I don't know that it would climb that much, but that is the other side of things where the market could also climb because money climbs. So who knows? I mean, there's a lot of calculated risk that goes into it. Brother Bob says we will pay BA 30 million APY because that is the market rate. Man, I wish I was as confident as you were on that one, Brother Bob. Dave says if he shows out this year and doesn't sit, I don't
I
know
think
what.
that was probably
Oh, going back to the last count.
yeah.
I got you. Okay. So he's saying if he shows, so he's basically saying what you said, where if he doesn't get paid, but he plays really well, he gets more money. But with the increase of the salary cap going up, it could be a blessing in disguise for him. Okay. That's totally fair. I see what you're saying. I got it. All right. We were just talking about offensive line. And I don't know if you saw this, Sunil, but I put a video up on my channel yesterday talking about this. And this was not Tom Brady's intention at all. He wasn't like taking a shot at the 49ers by any means. He was just talking about how important a good offensive line is to win a Super Bowl and how important it is for a quarterback's development. He was asked about the offensive line. Colin Cowherd, the way that he teed up the question, was talking about Aaron Rodgers and some of the young quarterbacks and saying, just how important is an offensive line for the young guys and the old guys as well. And Tom Brady went on this like 3-minute thing where he just talked about how important the offensive line was. And this is where it seemed like he was mentioning the 49ers without actually mentioning them. He said, if you don't have that upper echelon offensive line, then you better be really good everywhere else to make up for it. And that immediately made me think of the 49ers, which is they don't have that upper echelon offensive line, but they are really good everywhere else. And that's kind of how they've stayed afloat, but they haven't quite gotten over the hump. And then he goes on to talk about the center position in general and how important that position is and how the quarterback and center must be best friends and grow together and have a great relationship and trust and all these things. And so that kind of made me think of a Kyle Shanahan quote as well, where he talked about how the center position is the heartbeat of the offense, yet the centers he's had here are not necessarily a display of that outside of maybe Mac for the 1 year. So I guess I ask all of that or say all of that to ask this. Do you, when you hear what Tom Brady says, does it make you at all question maybe the roster construction as it currently is built for the 49ers? And if not, that's okay. But as this wave of players that are a little bit older kind of move on and they're looking for a new core, would you adjust on the fly and start going heavy in the trenches and start building that way? So, two-part question. Hopefully that makes sense.
So it was interesting because I watched your video, and shout out to you for putting out great content. See, I think this is one of those things where whatever your bias is, you're going to hear it in a different way. Because everything that Tom Brady said, because I'm with you. I think that there is a way to upgrade this offensive line, and they should have. However, based off of what I heard from Tom Brady, I would look at the 49ers offensive line and consider that one of the top offensive lines based off of what he said a great offensive line does. Because he mentioned two things. He mentioned the reason why you want a great offensive line is they're going to dictate every single run play. And whether you want to agree with, the one thing that you can't disagree with when it comes to 49ers offensive lines is they're great at run blocking, because the 49ers offense has been top 3 in rushing. You could like multiple times under Kyle Shanahan. So that was the one thing that he talked about, why the offensive line is great. What is the impact of a great offensive line? And the second thing was giving your quarterback clean pockets and enough time to throw the ball. And if we, obviously watching every single game, we know that with Purdy, he uses his mobility, quick release, Jimmy Garoppolo before him, quick release to kind of get the ball out, which, led them to be have less sacks. But the facts are, if you just go off of the numbers, the 49ers quarterbacks aren't one of the top sacked quarterbacks, and they're not one of the top rush quarterbacks in this tenure with Kyle Shanahan. So the names aren't sexy. They've obviously had moments that didn't look really, really good for this offensive line. But if you go overall on what Tom Brady said, you look to for a dominant offensive line, 49ers kind of had that based off of what he said. And that's where it was kind of interesting, because you heard the complete opposite, that the 49ers are doing it based off of what's around them. When I look at it and say, they've pretty much been consistently one of the best running offensive lines. Like, that's not debatable. And they're not as bad in pass protection that's their weakness for sure, but they're not as bad compared to the rest of the league as, some of the fan base say they are. Now, with that said, I still think they should have used some of the higher picks on offensive linemen. I've been saying that for quite some time, but just based off of what the clip that you played of Tom Brady, I don't think he's pointing fingers at the 49ers offensive line and saying that they're not good. In fact, I think based off of what he said, it gives more ammunition for people that do think this offensive line is fine, that they're better than what maybe people give them credit for.
Let me ask the question in a different way. So a part of the way that he teed him up for that question, he talked about how when he transitioned from the Patriots over to the Bucks, that he requested Tristan Wirfs be drafted, basically. Like, that was somebody he wanted because he wanted their offensive line to be better. Do you believe that if Tom Brady was coming to the 49ers right now to be the starter of this team, that he would be requesting an upgraded offensive line?
That is a good question. I don't know. It's hard to say.
It is. It's hard to say. It's hard to be in his mind.
Yeah.
Because what you said makes a lot of sense. But when I think about it from the aspect of what would Tom Brady actually do if he was coming here, I think he would want improvement on the offensive line.
So here's why it's hard for me, because I don't think every single quarterback can play behind this offensive line, because I do think you having a quick release is imperative to work in this offensive line, to work in this offensive system. Let's just put it that way. So I don't think you can just pull every quarterback and they're successful behind this offensive line. Now, the last year of Tampa Tom, I don't think, if that's the version that we're getting, absolutely he needs a better offensive line, because he has no movement in the pocket whatsoever. But, initially when he went to Tampa and they won the Super Bowl, he's still relying on his quick release and his ability to move in the pocket. He still had that to a certain extent. And I think that this offensive line is geared, this type of offensive line, he could be successful behind. And then he has the plethora of weapons that, he has as far as receivers, tight ends, running backs, that I don't think he would be that concerned with it.
JM says, never once did I think Brady was talking about the Niners. No, he wasn't talking. That was clear. He was not talking specifically about the Niners. But when I listen to him talk, I'm trying to picture what he would think of the Niners based off of what he's saying. And do the Niners fit the bill of what he's saying is important to him as a quarterback? The greatest of all time, 7 rings. What would be important to him? And would the 49ers fit that roster construction? And I think the answer is unequivocally no. And so when I look at it, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to lean with a guy who has 7 rings over a guy who has 0 rings. That's the way I'm going to do it, and obviously it happens to agree with what I believe a roster should look like, which is priority number 1 is get a quarterback. Priority number 2 is protect that quarterback. And priority number 3 is get guys that can get after the opposing quarterback. And I feel like the 49ers have really tried to nail number 1, and maybe they've got it in Brock Purdy. They certainly have gone after number 3, but number 2, I think they've let dangle a little bit too long, and they can use some improvement there, especially because the way that I see it is going forward, I think it would be easier to invest in the offensive line and revamp the offensive line versus trying to build an all-star crew around a weak offensive line the way they've done now. I think that may not have been the intention with their roster construction, but that's kind of what happened over the course of these years. But now that some of these guys are going to start falling off over the next 2 years, the Debos, the Kittles, the CMCs, the what have you, instead of trying to replace all of them with more great players at their position, why not try to just beef up the offensive line, protect Purdy, and allow him to just camp back there as long as he can and allow receivers to get open? So I think there's multiple ways that you can skin a cat, but I'm trying to look at what Tom Brady's saying and reason with what the 49ers have and say, okay, how does this match up or how does it not? He certainly was not talking directly about the 49ers. That much was clear.
Yeah. And I think, once again, I think it depends on the bias you go into it, because he also mentioned you're not going to be a competitive team consistently year after year unless you have a top tier offensive line. And it's irrefutable that the 49ers have been contending consistently, right? 4 out of 5 NFC championship games, obviously made it to the Super Bowl, and, ran into potentially the greatest quarterback of all time and the greatest coach of all time. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, I could see how people that want to point and say this offensive line is weak, that, Tom Brady says that. I could also see people that think that this offensive line is fine use that same interview to show why this offensive line is actually good.
Yeah. Lee, is this a question for the 49ers? This is probably a rhetorical question, right? No, they clearly didn't draft like it was much of a need. Why they didn't draft like it was much of a need, I don't know. That is the $1 million question. I think if we knew that, then we probably wouldn't be talking about the offensive line much at all. All right, let's switch to the other side of the line, the trenches. The third most important thing on my list, Let's talk a little bit about Bosa and Floyd and what this tandem can produce. First of all, do you agree with this statement here, which is this is the best rushing tandem that they've had since Bosa's rookie year opposite of D Ford?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the first time since Bosa has been quote unquote Bosa that he's had another guy that's gotten double digit sacks in the league consistently, right? Um, so yeah, I think that's something to be very excited about. That there's somebody that can win one on one that has shown the ability to, put up double digit sacks. I think last year wasn't he? Was he at double digits last year? I think he had 10
If
last
he
year.
wasn't, he's sat between like 9.5 and 10.5 for 3 straight years. He's like right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So absolutely, I think outside of D Ford and Bosa's rookie season, this is the best combination we've had.
Yeah, I agree with that. And not only from a standpoint of production, but also a standpoint of how that production gets done. Because I believe like there's multiple different archetypes for pass rushers. Like there's guys that are heavy and they bull rush to get to the quarterback. There are guys that are very quick and just beat you off the line like Hassan Reddick and get to the quarterback. Then there are your technicians like a Bosa who uses every move in the book to get to the quarterback. I've always felt since we saw D Ford here, and it was such a short stint, unfortunately, but when he played, there was a massive difference of when he was playing and when he wasn't. That the perfect archetype opposite of Bosa is that pure speed rusher. And that's what you get in Floyd. And so it's not just that he's productive, but it's how he's productive. So now you've got essentially your speed rusher opposite of your technician. And I think that's the perfect archetypes to be together. So I think there's multiple ways to look at it and say, yes, this is the best. But now that we agree that it is, the question is what are the expectations? Because you are talking about Floyd, who is a 10 sack guy almost every year. Bosa in a down year had 10.5 sacks, but now he's the highest paid edge rusher in the league. What would you expect as far as a sack total from these two combined, assuming they play 17 games?
Yeah, I'm looking for 25 and above between the two of them. I think that's a realistic number. And I think there's potential to even get to 30 between the two of them, depending on how good Bosa can be. But anything less than 25 to me, Jesse, would be a disappointment.
Would it be uncivilized?
It would be uncivilized.
Only a few nerds in the chat are going to recognize that one. Okay. I agree. I think 25 is probably that number. I think you're probably arriving at the 25 saying Bosa's got to get to 15. Floyd's got to hold, serve, and get to his 10. Or maybe he gets to 9.5 and Bosa's at 15.5. And again, sacks are not everything, but they are something. They are very important. And if Bosa is going to make the kind of money that he's making, he's going to have to be able to get home at a much higher clip than 10.5 sacks or whatever he had last year. So I would expect bare minimum 15 from him and then Floyd holding serve. I think that's fair. I would like it to be 27 plus. I would prefer that, but 25's got to be the floor.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's possible, and potentially they could even help one thing that I think this tandem has that first tandem didn't have was a better secondary. So I think this secondary can maybe help them get some more production as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Atane's interpreter says, remember after the Browns game, folks thought Randy Gregory was the solution. Well, I mean, Gregory's kind of that poor man's D Ford Floyd get out where it's like he's got the speed, he's got the body type, but he's just not quite at the level of those two guys. And I think that's why Floyd being here really brings up the floor of what the expectations are, because I think Gregory's a good rotational guy, but he's just not that guy that can be the starter and get you 10 plus sacks. So that's something that
Yeah, and
Floyd
he was
has
coming
been.
off injuries and things like that too. So
Mhm.
we were hoping to get the best of Gregory, where I think with Floyd, he hasn't had a dip in his production. We're foreseeably getting, even though age wise he's up there, as far as production, he still is producing at a very high clip.
Absolutely. And Marco brings up a good point. Do we get production from Beal, who's a speed guy? I hope so.
Yeah, I mean he's healthy, hopefully, finally. So,
Yeah.
and the one thing that I like about Bill is he's used to not being the guy and still getting production, because he was on that Georgia
Yeah.
defensive line where
Good
he
point.
was he was just the guy in the rotation, so he can get a high production without a lot of reps, which I think is going to be his role here in this system as well. Um, and if he could get, 6 sacks like he did in college, 6 to 8 like he would get in college, I think that'd be phenomenal.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be Beal. It could be Jackson. I mean, they both kind of fit that mold. One of them has to do something. I mean, if not, they might be acquiring another guy at the trade deadline again. I mean, this is kind of what they've done. I don't know. I just hope that one of those two certainly can step up. Beal's going into year two, so maybe he has more of a chance. Rookies don't necessarily come in and make huge noise, especially drafted that late. Jackson, unfortunately, is going into year three, made a ton of noise week one, and then that was basically it. But ultimately, those were Armstead sacks, anyways. He was just there for cleanup. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I think if this defensive line is really going to reach its potential, one of those two guys certainly has to step up and be a rotational piece and probably bring home 4 to 6 sacks themselves. So
I agree.
Kendrick Lamar says, "Hey Jesse, I'm a Hawks fan. I have a question for you. Are you worried about the Super Bowl hangover? I know when we lost that Super Bowl to the Patriots, that to me that was the beginning of the end of Pete Carroll." Ooh, that's an interesting topic. I don't know, man. I don't know how to quantify a Super Bowl hangover. I really don't. And so it obviously exists because these teams that lose Super Bowls for the most part, unless you're Tom Brady led team, they don't get back the next year. And the Chiefs, even with Patrick Mahomes, very close, right? But I think they ended up losing to the Bengals the next year, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, man, it is really, really hard to get back there. I don't know if I'm concerned about the hangover as much as I am just the league kind of catching up. Last year was a perfect opportunity for the 49ers. The NFC was down. Hell, the Chiefs were down. I don't even think that on paper they were near the best team in the AFC, but they made it out of the AFC, but they made it out of the AFC and still won a Super Bowl. And that was coming in banged up, tons of injuries in the trenches, and they still found a way. So I just don't know how the 49ers go back, do it again with a NFC that has gotten better and the Chiefs presumably getting better. And that's assuming the Chiefs even make it back themselves. Some of these other teams in the AFC are absolutely incredible. So that would be more my concern, more so than just like this mystery hangover that I don't know how to quantify.
Yeah, and I think if we see the beginning of the end for Kyle Shanahan, it's not going to be the Super Bowl hangover as much as just losing a lot of talent due to not having a cheap quarterback anymore, right? So
Yeah.
it could be that. I think, for all of the talk about a Super Bowl hangover, I sent you the interview. I don't know if you got a chance to look at it. Logan Ryan was
Mhm.
on Colin Cowherd as well, talking about the culture with the 49ers and how they felt about losing the Super Bowl and what his beliefs are about where the 49ers are going to go this season. And that's a guy who, has won multiple Super Bowls with the Patriots, knows what a culture looks like, knows what, the habits of a Super Bowl caliber team is. And he had nothing but positives to say about the 49ers and that he believes that this year is a year that they're going to go get it. And I think from being inside of that building, seeing guys like Bosa and Debo show up to voluntary training camp in the shape that they came in, being there as the leaders and whatnot. They're not acting like they have a hangover. Let's just put it that way. They're still looking motivated. I still think they have all the talent in the world, and I think there's more people on this team that are determined to get over that hump than that are gonna just wallow. I think the only thing that holds them back, honestly, Jesse, is not going to be anybody in the NFC. It's just going to be injuries. If they are relatively healthy, I don't think there's a team in the NFC that can match them. In a 4-quarter game.
Yeah, you may be right about that. I'll say this. Obviously, Logan Ryan knows what a Super Bowl winning team looks like, at least from a motivational aspect. And I love hearing that. But what I think we overlook a lot when we hear those things is the 49ers are not the only team out there that does this, right? That is doing things the right way to go win a Super Bowl. Obviously, otherwise they would just be winning Super Bowls. Like if he was in the Chiefs locker room, I'm sure he would get the same vibe. If he was in the Ravens locker room or the Lions locker, you know what I mean? The 49ers
maybe not
are
though.
not.
That's
unique,
where the assumptions come, right? Because here's the difference between obviously Kansas City, they're the best, right? So nothing negative to say about them. But all these other teams, Jesse, that you're saying, hey, they're about to catch up and all this kind of stuff, they haven't won. They're just the newest thing. The Lions, Green Bay, all of these teams, they aren't 4 out of 5 years in the NFC Championship game. They haven't been to the Super Bowl 2 years. They haven't had that consistency in winning. And I think it's kind of like that thing where the 49ers have just been there. So it's just like you diminish what they're doing, and you're always excited about the next guy up type of thing. And I just don't see it. I think that a lot of those teams are getting better, but until they consistently win, you got to give it to the 49ers as far as who is more likely to get the win. And that's just the way that I see it. It's just, I think everybody's so down on the fan bar. There's a portion of the fan base that's so down on the team because they haven't been able to get it done, that they just think that, okay, well, then some other team is going to be able to get it done. I don't see that because none of these teams are consistently beating the 49ers in the NFC at least.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I think smart money would be on field versus the 49ers. I mean, if I said right now you could place a bet, I'm going to give you have to bet your life savings on the field or the 49ers coming out of the NFC. I think the smart money would be on the field, right? And so, I mean, regardless of how you feel about the 49ers, it's still just the 49ers having a chance. And I agree. I mean, I tend to agree. If the 49ers are healthy and they've got the experience and all these other things, I love their chances. I guess the point is that one thing that you said throughout the course of that, which is really all I'm saying, is just that these teams have gotten better on paper. Now, how does that translate? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, every year is different, but they've certainly improved on paper, and that's all you can do at this point. The only championship you can win at this point is paper champion, right? You have to actually put cleats on turf and make things happen. But if the best you can do, like there's that saying, like you can only play who's on your schedule. Well, who's on the schedule right now is like winning in the draft and free agency. And that's what some of these teams have been able to do. We'll see how it plays out. But then as far as like a culture standpoint, like I know that culture exists with the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, every single person that comes in and out of that locker room is like the Raven way. We all know what that means. We all know it's simple to get the grasp. And you see everybody moving the Raven way when you're in that locker room. They talk about how special it is. So I guess my thing is like the 49ers are not unique. Now they are probably one of just a few teams that are culturally in that spot. And that's why they're there year after year after year. And so that's where a guy like Kyle Shanahan does deserve some credit when people want to crap on him. It's like, well, obviously the culture's in a good spot and these guys work their butts off. And they are there year after year after year. It's frustrating to not get over the hump, but you can't just take that away from them. Building a strong culture and a winning culture for many years is not something easy to do, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. I just know that it's not the only team that is built like that in the league. So that's all.
Yeah, but I also think that a lot of these teams where they're good cultures, they haven't had the success that the 49ers have had outside of, Kansas City and maybe the Rams. We went through the organizations, but
Yeah.
the Ravens, for as good as they've been, haven't had the same success as since Kyle Shanahan has been there, as the 49ers have. So there's good culture doesn't also necessarily mean you're going to be winning and all that kind of stuff. You're going to be consistently in the hunt. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, it's more than just culture, right? The 49ers have culture, plus they've been able to go out there and win consistently as well.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned too, back to that last question about Super Bowl hangover, is you said, hey, I don't know if it's as much the Super Bowl hangover that would be the decline of Kyle Shanahan, but one thing that might be the decline of Kyle Shanahan is a quarterback that's getting paid a lot of money. Well, if you look at that Seahawks team, what coincided with the Super Bowl hangover was Russell Wilson getting big time money.
Yep.
They obviously had every reason in the world to believe that he was absolutely going to be the guy. That didn't necessarily turn out to be the case. And so that put them behind the 8 ball, and they were just never able to duplicate it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that probably was a bigger reason as to why Seattle wasn't the same team, because they lost all that talent on defense and then they relied on Russell Wilson. And we'll see long term what that looks like with Brock Purdy if the assumption is he's going to get paid.
What's scary about that situation, Jesse, is I don't think anybody thought Russell Wilson wasn't the right guy.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to have the right guy, quote unquote, and he couldn't get it done, it scares you, because I don't think everybody hands down has the same confidence in Brock Purdy as they had at Russell Wilson at that time he was getting paid, right? And we've only seen one quarterback that's been able to do it, and his name is Patrick Mahomes, right? Other than that, all of these other quarterbacks have been, relatively lower cap hits than what, Purdy is going to be in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Brother Bob says, wait, Reed is not better than Bill Walsh. Come on. Could anybody?
He could go down. I said potentially he could go down as it. I mean, Reed's career is not over, right? If he goes on,
he keeps winning, man. I don't know. I mean, you might look at it and say, hey,
if he wins another 2-3 Super Bowls, which is, he just got an extension. He still has Patrick Mahomes. He still has, these guys locked up. They just went back-to-back Super Bowls. Like, if he wins another 2, I think he's in the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Leon Sandcastle, great name, says Wirfs wants a new deal. It'd be smart to offer Debo and McKivitz for Wirfs, then slide CMC to that wide back role to extend his career. Listen, yes, that would be smart. It would not be smart for Tampa to take that deal.
Right.
And it takes 2 to tango.
It's not this isn't the NBA when it comes to drafts.
I wish, though, man. That would be great. Shady Luke says, Jesse, I find it kind of funny that Niners fans, not all, but I see a solid amount, dismiss the Lions and Packers as threats. They're dangerous. This is not just unique to Niners fans, by the way, but there is a large group of this fan base that certainly looks at anything that anybody else does and poo-poos it. And then if the 49ers were to do the same thing, it's like, oh my gosh, the greatest thing ever. Do you see what the 49ers did? And so I think, like I said, I don't think that's unique to San Francisco. I think that's something that happens among most fan bases, but certainly it does happen here. And yeah, they dismiss a lot of things.
I just disagree, because I don't think that they're not threats. Like, they're good. Any team could be any team. They're one of the elite teams of the NFC. But do you consider the Cowboys a threat?
No.
Why? They have
because
just as an elite
beaten them.
Okay, well, what's Green Bay's record with the 49ers in the Kyle Shanahan
love
era? In the Kyle Shanahan era with the same
coach?
But
this is a whole new, like, you know what I mean? It's not even the same quarterback or any of that.
Do you think that this team is better than those Aaron Rodgers teams?
Let me say this: if Dak Prescott was replaced with even a quarterback that was close to his like, let's say it was let's say Kirk Cousins went to Dallas this year, I would like Dallas's chances a lot more than I do with Dak Prescott. And this isn't saying that Kirk's necessarily better than Dak. I mean, you can make that argument, but ultimately, like, there's something to do with
Do you
Dak
think
and that coach that can't get over the hump with the 49ers in particular.
do you think that this Green Bay iteration is better than the Aaron Rodgers teams that the 49ers face?
Over the last few years?
Over when Aaron Rodgers was MVP years, which was
I
just
do. I do. I think it's a more
okay.
complete
Well,
team. Yeah, I
I
do.
disagree. I think their defense got worse this offseason. They lost some guys on defense. I think that Jordan Love is great. Bakersfield boy, always gonna get excited about him. But they're bringing in a lot of new pieces, and that team is very very young. Eventually, can they be that team? But maybe. But I don't think it's dismissive to be like, hey, they have to win first before I'm scared of them, right? And the
Oh, no,
same
no, no.
thing,
We don't need to be scared. There's a difference. Like what he's saying is basically people look at the line, which is not what you're doing. You're looking at these teams and saying, yes, they're legitimate teams. I just am going to put my money down on the 49ers. If that matchup comes to fruition, I'm taking the Niners. That is different than saying, hey, these teams pose no threat, which is what
right?
he's saying. That's not at all what you're saying.
No, but
But you don't have to be scared of them by any
right.
means. Like that's not arrogance. That's just like, hey, I believe in the 49ers. Like that's
And just
okay.
history, right? We've seen these teams play, right? So we're gonna need to see something out of the Packers and the Lions that show us that they could beat the 49ers. We don't have to see anything new out of the 49ers that shows us that they could beat these teams. That's all I'm saying. Because look, the 49ers had to go through both of those teams to make it to the Super Bowl. They already know how to beat these teams. It's not vice versa. So that would be these teams doing something they haven't done yet, which is beat the 49ers. And I think that sometimes it's easy to say that just happens, but in every single sport, we see how hard that is to beat the team that's been the team for so long.
So does that mean if the 49ers play the Rams in the NFC Championship that we should look at the Rams and say they're the favorite?
Not necessarily, but the 49ers have beat the Rams plenty of times in the regular season, right? Detroit hasn't beat the Niners in any season, in regular season, postseason. Green Bay as well. They haven't beat the Niners in regular season,
Well,
postseason. Well,
they
once,
do. Yeah, they actually do own
once,
a good record against the 49ers in the regular season in the Shanahan era. It's the postseason that they can't get it done. And now they've got a whole new quarterback and
right?
team and everything, right? And so it's like we're literally talking about an isolated one game and saying, hey, they just did it. So that means they've proven they can do it. But I was like, well, I mean, yeah, but they were also massive favorites, and those two teams proved that with much less rosters that they could hang in, and now those rosters are improving. So what's to say they can't do it again? And maybe now we've got to go to their home field because we're not the number one seed, right? Like things change we're talking Dallas is like this is basically the same Dallas team, and it's been owned repeatedly by the 49ers. The Lions have revamped everything. That's that we've played them one time and we're 1-0. Congratulations. Green Bay's revamped everything. We're 1-0. Congratulations. But that doesn't mean like we own them by any suggestion or measure. That was just a game that we happened to beat them.
Yeah, I just don't see it the other way. Like I think I think it's kind of just giving it to
So
them.
let me ask you this then. So Philly's a team that we've played twice over the last couple of years. One time we mopped them in the regular season. The other time they beat us in an NFC championship. Who would have the mental edge in that game?
I think I would be more afraid of Philly than those other two teams you mentioned.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, but I don't know if I agree with it, but at the very least, I think that at least lines up with what you've laid out prior. You're staying consistent. So I'll give you that.
Yeah, and I think that the Phillies team at full strength is the biggest threat to the 49ers.
And they may be. That's a very good roster as well. I could see. I have a scenario where there are 4 teams outside of the 49ers that win 11 or more games this year in the NFC. And that's what I'm saying. The NFC feels like it's risen, where you've got the Rams, I think, could win 11 games. I think the Eagles could win 11 games. I think the Packers and the Lions could win 11 games. And I wouldn't be shocked if any of those teams did so, or even 12 games. And the 49ers, that's about where I have the Niners at. So, getting the number 1 seed is going to be tough. And then just playing these teams in general, it's going to be some good matchups. Ricky Williams says if we're not going to the playoffs and it's clear by the trade deadline, keep Fred, Bosa, BA, trade everyone and start fresh with Brock under a deal. Yeah, but that's the problem. Like we've seen that before too, where the 49ers were 3-5 at a deadline. They go and add a piece and boom, they're right back in it. So I think the only way they're not in it is if Brock Purdy goes down or maybe a CMC goes down or something like that, and they can't replace him with anybody who's close to it, right? Which that'd be really hard to do. Like you've got a starting level quarterback. Replacing him at week 4 is not going to be an easy task, and replacing Christian McCaffrey week 4 is not going to be an easy task either. You know what I mean? So,
dude, that if Brock Purdy gets injured this season,
Bosa, Trent Williams, any of those guys, actually.
No, that's probably a topic for another show. We could go off on this. Like, could there be a worse thing that happens for the 49ers? Is Brock Purdy going down, not just for on the field, but the decision to make next season?
Oh, that would be, yeah. You're opening a can of worms with that one. That's a great point. Point. So, yeah, I don't even want to talk about that. Actually.
We don't even want that.
Let's not. Okay. I'd rather not. Thanks. All right, let's talk about this Ricky Pearsall prediction from Bleacher Report. Now, Bleacher Report didn't just do this with Ricky Pearsall. They did it with all the first-round wide receivers. And they basically just went through their numbers and what they expect from them this year. And I don't think they're that crazy with this. They said that Ricky Pearsall, they're predicting to have 24 catches, 283 yards, and 1 touchdown. So first of all, do you think they're way off in their prediction, or do you think they're roughly in the wheelhouse?
It's hard to say. I think there's a
remember Jennings had 19 catches last year.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
He was the third receiver.
There's a scenario where they could be spot on. There's a scenario where they could be way off, and there's a scenario where they could be way off in the other direction. Like he doesn't even get those numbers because we don't know what his playing time is going to be or how much opportunity he's going to get on this roster. Let's say a Debo goes down for a significant amount of time.
We can't predict that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then those numbers he probably breaks those numbers, right? If this if these receiving core stays healthy the whole season, it might be tough for him to get the opportunities to get 24 catches and those 300 yards or whatever. So it's really tough to say because I don't think he's right now. I don't think he's going to be judged based off of this season by the 49ers brass. I think he's more for sure needs to pop off next season when they make a decision with the BA or Debo, because I think both of us agree they're both not coming back next season. It's going to be one or the other type of situation. And then Pearsall is going to slide into that second role per se.
Well, and at the very least, we know Jennings probably won't be back. So at the very least, like he's going to, even if BA and Debo come back, then all of a sudden the floodgates open, so to speak, as far as what his production could be, because now he's on the field 70% of the time or what have you. So, and I think there's a scenario where those guys are all here this year and relatively healthy, and he could still get to this point, depending on what the 49ers want to do. Do they go with more of a 5-wide look? Do they go more empty sets? Do they mix in 3 receivers at a time? And, knowing that Jennings is probably not going to be back, they don't really care to drive his value up for any reason. It's like, why not play Pearsall in some of these situations and mix him in, especially if they're blowing teams out? So I could see a scenario where all those guys are healthy and he could still reach these numbers. But man, I guess the next question is would you be disappointed if they spent a first-round pick on a guy like Ricky and this was the production this year?
I mean, no, because I see the long game. I know why they got him. Like, ultimately, I think he was, top 40 type pick from a lot of the what's it called, draft boards that I've seen, and they got him at 31
Mhm.
because they believe that he's going to be, a really good receiver in this league. And yeah, I mean, it's disappointing in the sense it would be disappointing in the sense that potentially they could have got maybe a different player that made an impact more this season. However, I would judge this based off of 2 years from now, 3 years from now, where Ricky Pearsall is at. And I don't think it's going to matter what he did in year one if he goes off and he becomes, an all pro receiver, which I think he has the potential to do. One thing that Kyle Shanahan does well is in the first and second round, he picks good receivers. Like, so the 49ers have done well with that.
I'm going to say I'm not disappointed, but for a different reason. More so because I kind of expect it. And my whole frustration with the pick was he's probably not going to get to contract number 2 with San Francisco. He's not going to be super productive year 1 just because the opening is not there for him, which means the best you're going to get from Ricky is 4 good years. And you spent a first round pick on that. So for me, I won't be disappointed. It's more of like I kind of expect it, and not because he can't play or he wouldn't be any good if he was put into that situation, but more so I just don't expect for those openings to be there, barring injury. And I'm certainly not going to predict injury. So I'm just going to assume that this is roughly ish what his numbers will look like. And hopefully he produces for 4 years and then he's gone because he'll be 29 and they're not going to pay him. So,
Yeah, we'll see. But in those 4 years, if they end up getting a couple chips, it wouldn't matter.
oh, for sure. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. If they win a couple Super Bowls, then the last thing I'm going to be worried about was the 2024 first round pick and Ricky Pearsall. I'll say that right now. Alan from Cole says, what is one bold take y'all have for this upcoming season? I love bold takes from the standpoint that when I hit, it's pretty awesome. Like last year, a couple bold takes I had were one of them was Kittle, CMC, Ayuk, and Debo would all go over 1,000 yards, and they did. And Brock Purdy would make a Pro Bowl, and he did. And then in the draft, I said a receiver would go in the first 2 rounds. So there have been those ones, but then there are some bold takes that are nowhere near hitting. And I know that you're like shouldn't be held accountable for them, but I feel like if I'm going to do a bold take, we're going to have to actually think about this, and it's going to be a topic on the show for this season. I think it's probably a little too early to give them.
Yeah, we got to do it outside of training camp.
Yeah, so we'll do that. It'll be a topic on a show at some point. We do it every year. I just don't know now's the time, and I don't want to be held accountable for those bold takes in this moment. Shady Luke says if BA ended up gone, I would make a big bet on the offense taking a peg down. Of course, I don't know if fans realize just how good he is now. I think a lot of fans do realize. I don't know if there's a lot of fans outside of 49er fan base that realizes, but he's very good, man. Very.
Everybody on this show knows for sure because BA is my favorite player on the team.
Yeah. We agree. We're in agreement. Right? He's my favorite player as well. Really, really enjoying him, and I don't want him to go anywhere. But I also don't think he is. I think from the outside looking in, people still have this thought that BA potentially doesn't end up on this team. And I just don't think that's an option. He's either going to play on the 5th-year option or he's going to have a deal. I don't see any situation where he's traded from this point on. It's too late for that, I believe. For a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl, I think it's just too late for that.
Right.
So, all right, Sunil, pretty much rounds it out. I want to say this. Pinned to the top of the chat is a link to my second channel, which has been kind of dormant for a while. That being said, I'm taking a new approach with it. Instead of just cut up videos and talking about one-off things, I'm going to go live over there. And I think Coach is going to be joining me most of the time. We're going to kind of venture into it together and just kind of get off our takes as far as the whole NFL goes and not just 49ers. You know, I love talking 49ers, but I do enjoy the NFL in total. And I think a lot of people here, you guys are hardcore fans. if you're here at this point in the offseason, you probably also enjoy the NFL. So if you could go over there, subscribe, tap in when we're live, show some support, that would be awesome. Greatly appreciated. Sunil, as always, thank you so much for joining me and coming up with amazing topics for our show on Tuesday. We'll be back at it then. And until tomorrow. Wait. Shady Luke says he would pay BA $30 million. By the way, he's a Philly fan. So for what it's worth. All right, y'all. Peace.